I would like to express deep, heartfelt appreciation for all those who facilitated inviting, remembering, honoring Paramananda Prabhu. We appreciate that New Vrindaban was Srila Prabhupada's first farm community, his first cow, the beginning of cow protection for ISKCON. What's not so remembered is how Paramananda is not only a gentleman in all circumstances. He was, for those who knew him and had the honor of serving with him, such a staunch, committed advocate of what we fondly call the Plow Department. Over the decades, there's been a little diminishing of the acknowledgement that cows come in two genders. We're so fond of saying mother cow and appreciating her gifts. That's only half the equation. As we hear in the Bhagavatam this morning, Maharaj Pariksit, touring his kingdom, vigilant for the appearance of Kali, found him, Kali, beating a cow and a bull. Bhumi and Dharma, Father above, earth below. They're inseparable if we want to do proper credit to either. Paramananda Prabhu personified something that I've seen throughout my life in the field of agriculture, specifically with draft animals. There's always people that come forward and milk the cows and tend the garden. When it comes to raising and training, engaging and protecting the bull, there's much less participation. And Paramananda Prabhu perfectly exemplified that principle of honoring the bull on equal level as the cow in what we called at the time the Plow Department. Paramananda Prabhu was so committed that for decades, for many years at least, we were able to forbid any tractor to set foot on this ground because Srila Prabhupada said the tractor is the killer of a bull. Now there was inadequate manpower in the Plow Department, and we pushed really hard to keep up with the workload. And then there came a traffic pattern that made the spring so wet that the opportunity to get into the fields and plant was so minimal that we asked Srila Prabhupada, if we're in a bind, would it be acceptable if we hire a neighbor to come in with his tractor for a day and help us catch up? And Srila Prabhupada said, if necessary, you can do that. And we did. It was a repeat of what I saw in my childhood. That when farmers become so mesmerized with the production of the tractor, they lose interest in the draft animals, specifically for this conference, the bull. Paramananda, he maintained that commitment that we would produce our power by means of draft animals. And he fought gloriously for that principle. Srila Prabhupada loved everything he did. And he told some stories. One day he was walking with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, if I say, he asked the devotees, if I say, this is my cow, what does it mean? And the devotees started speculating, it means false ego, or this or that, or the other thing. And you see with Srila Prabhupada, sometimes he'd ask a question and nobody could get the answer because he had something on his mind that only he could reveal himself. So he gave the answer. If I say this is my cow, that means I accept her gifts and I am duty bound to protect her all her life. In the early 70s, there was an onslaught of multiflora roses, which are used in Europe for fences because they're impenetrable. But Americans don't tend their fields the way the Europeans do, and they began spreading and taking over. In some pastures, we lost 90% of the land to multiflora roses, which are thorns. So one day, Paramananda Prabhu was out there single-handedly hacking away at the multiflora roses and piling them. And Srila Prabhupada wandered into the pasture and asked what he was doing. He said, I'm stacking these thorns to burn. And he said, in the fireplace? This was before the days of the wood stoves. We had an open fireplace. And Paramananda Prabhu said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I will burn the thorns in the fireplace. Because Srila Prabhupada would not approve of wasting anything. Imparting that this world, this planet, Bhumi, is Krishna's nature, Krishna's consort, Krishna's energy. The macrocosmic cow who has a symbiotic relationship with the microcosmic cows. Talking about Paramananda Prabhu here in the palace setting is very touching because of a memory that's grown fonder over the years. I was working here because the first crews on the palace project were the draft animals from the Plow Department. The teams of horses and oxen to clear the land, and then we had a horse-drawn or ox-drawn excavator which was working alongside with a neighbor's backhoe and bulldozer. I told the story recently, but I didn't tell a very significant part. So Kirtananda Maharaj figured something out that I tried to keep hidden, that I actually come from a background in heavy equipment. I didn't want that to get out, but he could see by the way I was working with the heavy equipment that I had experience in the field. So the day came when we had an opportunity to purchase this fine marble at a very reduced price that even we could afford. We just had to get it here. And at that time, transportation was by means of an 1896 grain wagon. And if you really needed to go long distance, we had a pickup truck, which was usually broken down. So how do you transport all this marble from Pittsburgh? One of the neighbors had an old tractor trailer that looked like an overgrown Model A in the junkyard corner of his pasture. And he said, if we could get it out and get it running, we could use it. So here's the memory that is so fond. Kirtananda Maharaj asked Paramananda if he could have me for a day to drive a truck. Paramananda looked perplexed. Why do you have to take him to drive a truck? And I said, well, this is tractor trailer. And Paramananda, in the most childlike, innocent mood, he asked, you mean the kind that bends in the middle?
Sorry? Bends in the middle.
You mean the kind that bends in the middle? Because that would mean that you can't just hand it over to the average brahmachari. It requires somebody with experience, first of all, to get the thing to run. And he said, yes, it's the kind that bends in the middle. I'll never forget the look on Paramananda's face. It was prophetic. His countenance just kind of dropped. And he said, for the sake of this project, yes, I'll give my right-hand man for the day. He was so committed to the Plow Department that he didn't want anything to distract our focus from that sacrament of the bull and the cow being our priorities for life in New Vrindaban. Mm-hmm. As New Vrindaban began taking a different course, and the glory of the cow and the bull and the land was being more eclipsed, Paramananda Prabhu saw that this is getting to be like a losing battle. And one day, in the middle of a meadow, where the only workers was a blend of the cow department and the plow department. One day in 1974, Srila Prabhupada, without any of his elite entourage, just began walking into this hay meadow. So all those devotees of the cow department and the plow department, they filed in a line behind him as he walked out into the hay meadow, lost in his own thoughts and chanting Hare Krishna. When he reached halfway to the middle of the meadow, he stopped and turned around. And when he looked at these devotees, the Matajis with their plain saris decorated with patterns made of cow dung stains, and the plow department boys with their big boots, which we were so proud because for so many years you couldn't get boots here, with their big boots and their old torn clothes. Srila Prabhupada looked and he commented, these devotees are not very opulent, but they are jolly. And when he said jolly, he beamed. Because, as we were hearing this morning, Srila Prabhupada's standard for cow protection is the cow and the bull should be jolly. And if they are, mankind and Mother Earth will also be jolly. And Srila Prabhupada was seeing his vision unfolding before his eyes in this remote hay meadow at the Bahulabana farm. And then he turned and kept walking a little further. And he stopped again. And the devotees made a semicircle around him. And those devotees of the cow department and plow department all had the same thing on their mind. And we wanted to ask Srila Prabhupada, but we never had the opportunity when he was alone without his entourage, who would have directed the conversation their way. We wanted to ask him about how the management is directing this community in another direction than what the Plow Department and the Cow Department thought was most appropriate. And Srila Prabhupada intercepted our thoughts, and he answered and satisfied all our concerns. Now, a little context here is helpful, because New Vrindaban was the counterpart, in a sense, of Mamgachi in Navadvip Dham, which has a nickname, the Gaudiya Math Jail. Because that's where the Gaudiya Math would send their problem cases. And they would flourish there. And there's a practical reason and an esoteric reason. The practical reason is this cowherd village. And in the association of the cows and agriculture, these problem cases from Gaudiya Math would just blossom. The esoteric is that it's the birthplace of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, the last disciple of Lord Nityananda, who, like the youngest child in a family, receives the most affection and blessings from the Father, Lord Nityananda. New Vrindavan had a similar function in ISKCON. We were the grateful recipients of their problem cases. And in so many cases, they would just flourish and blossom in the association of the cows and the bulls in the Plow Department. Nevertheless, Greater ISKCON didn't see it quite like that. They saw that that's a place where you send problem cases. Because we're out preaching and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books and pleasing him in this way, which he emphasized so much. They're farmers. And then when we began building a palace for Srila Prabhupada, they thought we must have completely gone off the deep end then. And Srila Prabhupada defended us. Leave them alone. They have properly understood the philosophy, and they're doing the right thing. That's the context. Now, back to the story. We all have the same concern on our minds, everyone in the Plow Department and the Cow Department, that the management is taking this community in another direction. We wanted to express that. Srila Prabhupada intercepted our thoughts. He said, and the other part of this is we always thought that we were most fortunate, whereas in ISKCON they thought we were the most crazy. Srila Prabhupada addressed this group and he said, you don't know how fortunate you are. You have the land, the cows, and Sri Sri Radhavanavan Chandra. And he became very grave, in a blissful way. And he said it again, you don't know how fortunate you are. And in that simple interaction, which was not recorded, except in the hearts of those who were present, of which I'm probably the last survivor, and he put it into proper perspective, because it's so likely, we get so wrapped up in cows that we forget the bhumi is a cow, meaning the land and the cow are inseparable in terms of how they enhance and support one another. And the bull, Dharma. is, on the practical level, your organic power source. Which brings up another fond memory. Paramananda Prabhu had one standard. Because when you spread manure in the field, the sun leaches out its nutrients and other beneficial gifts. Paramananda Prabhu had a standard that any day we spread manure, it had to be either disked in or plowed in the same day. Back to the same principle. Nothing should be wasted in Krishna's service. So on the practical level, that's your source of organic power. There's no need, or there should be no need, for tractors which at every step are depleting the earth and polluting the environment. In contrast to the bull, who at every step is enriching the earth and purifying the environment. And by the time the tractor dies, I haven't met one yet that's reproduced itself. You got to buy another one. Whereas by the time the draft animals retire, they have reproduced themselves so many times over. Wealth, the land, and the cows. And this plundering, multinational, corporate world is reversing the natural order, trying to force the whole to serve the part, making everyone addicted to the quick fix of consumer goods. And this whole exploitative syndrome creates toxicity on every level, beginning with the ether, your consciousness, from which it expands into the air, the water, the soil. This industrial world is creating such a toxic environment that we can't be really true to our vows of no intoxication. And what's the first indication of intoxication? It's denial. When one is conceived, born, raised, trained, educated, and conditioned in a culture of denial, and you tell him he's in denial, what's he going to do but deny it? Therefore, there's only one thing wrong with the world, and that is everything, or the lack of Krishna consciousness. Putting Krishna back in the center, living according to his design, which enriches life at every step and prepares us for going back home to the land of the cows. Thank you for this opportunity to share our fine remembrances and honor the leader of New Vrindavan's Plow Department, Paramananda Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.